The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that only love could stir. It was as if the world held its breath, waiting for something extraordinary to unfold. A chance meeting, a fleeting glance, and suddenly, two souls were connected, unaware of how deep their bond would grow. This was the beginning of something timeless, a love that would defy the boundaries of time itself. Her name was Eliza, a quiet, thoughtful artist who often got lost in the pages of her sketchbook, dreaming of a life far beyond the ordinary. His name was Adrian, a passionate writer whose words could make the hardest heart soften, though he carried a secret that even his closest friends would never understand. They both lived in a world full of noise and distractions, yet when their paths crossed one fateful evening, something between them just clicked. It wasn't love at first sight. No, it was deeper than that. It was a quiet recognition of something that had always been there, waiting. As they spent more time together, their bond grew stronger, but so did the shadows lurking in Adrian's past. Secrets that could tear them apart were buried beneath layers of charm and wit. Eliza, unaware of the storm brewing, found herself falling in love, her heart racing every time their eyes met. She believed in their love, in the promise that this was meant to be. But was it really? The closer they grew, the more Eliza began to notice the small cracks in Adrian's carefully crafted facade. He was always distant at times, lost in his thoughts, as if he were carrying the weight of an unseen world on his shoulders. She couldn't understand it, but she was determined to break through the walls he'd built around himself. Then, one night, everything changed. A simple text, a forgotten word, and Adrian disappeared, vanishing as if he were never really there. Eliza was left in a whirlwind of emotions, struggling to understand what had happened. The questions lingered in the air, unanswered and heavy. What was Adrian hiding? Was their love truly as timeless as it felt, or was it destined to be lost in the chaos of the past? As Eliza stood at the edge of a broken dream, she realized that she had to uncover the truth about Adrian's secrets before it was too late. But little did she know, the answers she sought might change everything, even the love she thought was unshakable. Stay tuned because the story is far from over. Days passed, and Eliza found herself trapped in a whirlwind of confusion and hurt. Every corner of her apartment seemed to echo with memories of Adrian, the way he smiled when he looked at her, the laughter they shared during their late-night talks, the way his hand felt when it brushed against hers. She clung to those moments, unable to let go, but the absence of him felt louder than all their memories combined. Her friends tried to console her, but no words could ease the pain. They didn't understand. They hadn't seen what she had seen in Adrian, the vulnerability in his eyes when he spoke of his past, the way he guarded his heart with such intensity. There was a story there, hidden beneath his calm exterior, and Eliza was determined to uncover it. She couldn't shake the feeling that something about his disappearance wasn't just random. He had left with no explanation, no goodbye, no trace. Eliza decided to search for answers on her own. She returned to the places they had visited together, hoping to find some clue, some sign that would lead her back to him. She retraced their steps to the little bookstore where they had spent hours talking about their favorite authors. She returned to the quiet park bench by the river where they shared their first kiss. But with each visit, she only found herself sinking deeper into uncertainty. It was as if Adrian had never been there at all, like he had vanished into thin air. Then, one evening, a letter arrived. It was simple, unsigned, and sealed with wax, the kind of letter you only see in old films or books. Eliza's hands trembled as she broke the seal and read the words written inside. "You're getting too close," it said. "Let it go before it's too late." The chill that ran through her was bone deep. Who had sent this, and what did it mean? The mystery surrounding Adrian's disappearance was unraveling, but it only made her more determined to find the truth. Something told her that the answer was just within reach, if only she could uncover the hidden pieces of a story that was much darker than she ever imagined. The letter weighed heavily in Eliza's hands as she sat frozen in her living room, the words staring back at her like a challenge. Let it go, before it's too late. She didn't know who had sent it, but it was clear that someone didn't want her to keep searching for Adrian. Was it a warning, a threat, or was it just a cruel attempt to make her doubt everything she had felt for him? Eliza's mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Adrian had never been the kind of person to vanish without a trace. There had to be an explanation, but it seemed like every answer only led to more questions. What could be so dangerous that it would force Adrian to disappear? And why was it so important for her to stop digging into his past? Determined to get to the bottom of it, Eliza decided to visit the one person who might know something: Adrian's older brother, Theo. They hadn't spoken much before, but she knew he lived just outside the city, in a quiet house surrounded by tall, unkempt trees. Theo had always been a mystery to her, just as elusive as Adrian, but there was something about the way he avoided eye contact whenever Adrian's name was brought up. She couldn't shake the feeling that Theo knew more than he let on. The drive to Theo's house felt long, but when she finally arrived, she was greeted by an eerie silence. No one answered the door, so Eliza pushed it open, unsure of what she'd find inside. The house was cluttered, and the air smelled like old books and dust. As she wandered through the dimly lit rooms, her eyes were drawn to a small study at the back. There, she found a desk covered in papers and photographs, many of which seemed to be related to Adrian. Images of him as a child, newspaper clippings, and documents that Eliza didn't recognize. Just as she reached for one of the papers, a voice interrupted her. "You shouldn't be here." Eliza spun around to see Theo standing in the doorway, his face pale, eyes wide with fear. "I told Adrian you'd never understand," he whispered, his voice cracking. "You have no idea what you're getting into." Eliza's heart pounded in her chest. She hadn't expected him to show up, not like this. "Theo, I need to know what happened to Adrian," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "He's gone, and I can't just sit here pretending everything's fine. Please, I need to understand." For a long moment, Theo said nothing, his gaze darting from the papers to Eliza, torn between something unsaid. Then, with a heavy sigh, he stepped forward and grabbed her arm. "If you really want the truth, you need to leave. Now, there's more at stake than you think." His words were cryptic, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. Eliza could feel the tension building, suffocating the air around them. She wasn't ready to walk away, not now. Not when she was so close to understanding what had happened to the man she loved. But as Theo's grip tightened and the weight of his warning pressed down on her, Eliza couldn't help but wonder just how deep this story went, and if she was ready for the truth that was waiting to come to light. Eliza's heart raced as Theo's grip tightened on her arm. His eyes, filled with something between fear and desperation, held her in place. "You don't understand," he repeated, his voice strained. "You need to leave now, before it's too late." She could feel her pulse hammering in her ears, the tension thick in the room, and her mind refused to back down. "I can't leave, not after everything." Her voice barely above a whisper, she searched his eyes for any hint of truth, but there was nothing. Just more fear. "What happened to Adrian, Theo? What's going on?" Theo's face tightened, and for a moment, Eliza thought he might push her away or demand she leave for good. But instead, he exhaled slowly, as if making a decision, his shoulders slumping in defeat. "Fine, but you have to understand, This isn't just about Adrian. This isn't something you can fix. You're too deep in it now. He stepped back, releasing her arm, but his warning hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Eliza took a cautious step forward, her eyes never leaving his. What do you mean? What is this really about? Theo paused, glancing nervously toward the hallway as though expecting someone to appear. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a near whisper. Adrian wasn't just running from his past, Eliza. He was running from them, the people who've been after him for years. And you've gotten too close to the truth. The words struck her like a slap. Who? She demanded, her mind spinning. Who's been after him? What aren't you telling me? Theo hesitated again, clearly wrestling with something, before he finally said, there's more to Adrian's family than you know. We come from a long line of people involved in things no one should ever get mixed up in. And Adrian, he got caught up in it, got involved in something that could ruin everything. Eliza took a step back, trying to process what Theo had just said. So this whole time, he wasn't just hiding from his past, he was running from these people, and now I'm involved. Theo nodded grimly. You're part of this now, whether you want to be or not. The room seemed to grow colder. Eliza's mind reeled with questions. Who were these people? What had Adrian gotten involved in? But before she could speak, the sound of a door creaking open echoed through the house. Both of them froze. Eliza, you need to leave, Theo whispered urgently, his voice trembling. They're here. Before Eliza could process the words, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps outside the study, slow and deliberate. It was clear that whoever was coming didn't intend to let her walk away this time. Every instinct in her told her to run, but she couldn't. She had come too far, and the truth was right there, just within reach. The question was, could she survive the answers it would bring? The footsteps grew louder, each echo sending a chill down Eliza's spine. Her heart hammered in her chest, but she couldn't make herself move. Something deep inside told her that running wouldn't help anymore. Whatever was coming, whatever Theo was so afraid of, she had to face it. Theo's face was pale, his eyes wide with fear as he grabbed her arm once again. Eliza, listen to me. This is your last chance. You need to go. Now. But she didn't want to leave. Not now. Not when she was so close to the truth. Who's here, Theo? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. What's really going on? Who's after Adrian? Theo opened his mouth to speak, but before he could answer, the door slammed open with a force that made Eliza jump. Standing in the doorway was a figure she hadn't expected. It was Adrian. Her breath caught in her throat as she looked at him, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The man standing in front of her was not the Adrian she remembered. There was a coldness to his eyes, a hardness to his face that seemed like a mask. He looked different, almost distant, as if the man she had fallen for no longer existed. Adrian? Eliza whispered, her voice shaking. He didn't respond at first, his gaze flickering between her and Theo. Then, after a long silence, he finally spoke. I told you to stay away, Eliza, he said, his voice low and guarded. You shouldn't have followed me. Eliza's heart sank. She had so many questions, but the one that pushed its way to the front was the most urgent. Why? Why did you leave? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Adrian's eyes softened for just a moment before the mask returned. I was trying to protect you, he said quietly. There's more to this than you know. I was trying to keep you safe. Theo took a step back, his face a mixture of relief and fear. You should have told her, Adrian, he said. This was never supposed to happen. She was never supposed to find out. Eliza's mind raced. Find out what? What is going on here? She turned to Adrian, her eyes searching his face for any sign of the man she loved. What's the truth? Tell me. Adrian's face hardened again. You don't understand, he said, his voice edged with frustration. There are things in my past, things that go back farther than you can imagine, things that could destroy everything, not just for me, but for people I care about. Theo's expression darkened. You should have never gotten involved, Eliza, he said, his voice low. Now they're going to come for you, too. Eliza's stomach churned. Who? Who's going to come for me? Adrian's eyes met hers, a flicker of regret crossing his features. I never wanted this for you, he whispered, but it's too late now. They're already here. The sound of footsteps grew louder once again, but this time it wasn't just one set of feet. There were many, too many. Eliza's mind was spinning. Who were these people? Why had Adrian disappeared? And now, what did they want from her? Before she could react, the door slammed open once more, and a group of men, dressed in black suits and sunglasses, flooded into the room. Their presence was commanding, and Eliza's pulse quickened as they stepped toward her. One of the men, the tallest of the group, looked at her with an unsettling smile. Well, well, he said, his voice smooth but laced with danger. It looks like we've found our missing piece. Adrian stepped in front of her, his posture rigid. Stay away from her, he said, his voice laced with a warning. The man's smile widened. Oh, we've been waiting for her, Adrian. It's not just you we're after anymore. Eliza felt a chill run through her as the weight of his words sank in. What did they mean? What did they want with her? As the men closed in, Adrian stepped back, his gaze never leaving Eliza's. For a brief moment, their eyes locked, and Eliza saw something, something raw and vulnerable, that made her heart ache. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her, too, and the stakes had never been higher. In that moment, she realized that the truth she had been chasing was far darker and more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The game had changed, and now there was no turning back. The room felt suffocating, the air thick with tension as the group of men in black suits stepped closer, their eyes trained on Eliza. Adrian stood in front of her, his body tense, as if preparing for something far worse than just a confrontation. But Eliza, her heart racing, refused to back down. She had come too far, learned too much, to simply walk away now. What do you want from me? She demanded, her voice shaking but resolute. She had to know. There was no turning back from this moment. The man who had spoken before, the tallest of the group, stepped forward with a cold smile. It's not about what we want from you, dear, he said smoothly, his tone dripping with calm menace. It's about what Adrian has done and what he's been hiding. You're just a casualty in this whole game. Adrian's eyes flickered with pain, but he didn't say a word. Eliza turned her gaze to him, the weight of his silence hitting her like a blow. Had he been lying to her all along? Was she just a pawn in some twisted game? Adrian, she whispered, her voice breaking. What have you gotten us into? He looked at her, his eyes filled with regret, but also something else, something she couldn't quite place. I never wanted this for you, Eliza. I never wanted you to get hurt. The tall man chuckled darkly, cutting through the moment. Oh, this is rich. The love story of the century, he mocked. But that's not why we're here. We're here because of this. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small silver object, a flash drive. Eliza's stomach churned. What is that? This, the man continued, holds everything. The files, the data, the evidence of what Adrian's been involved in, the people he's betrayed. She turned to Adrian, her voice sharp with disbelief. Is this what you've been hiding? Is this why you disappeared? Adrian's face softened, and for the first time, Eliza saw the depth of the pain in his eyes. I never betrayed anyone. I was just trying to escape the life I was born into, a life that's tied to them. He gestured toward the men. I didn't want you caught in it. Before Eliza could process his words, the man with the flash drive stepped toward her, his eyes gleaming with an unsettling purpose. The truth, my dear, is that Adrian is tied to a secret network, one that controls more than you could imagine. And you, Eliza, have become a part of it simply by being close to him. In that moment, Eliza felt everything click into place. The mysterious disappearance, the strange warning letters, the fear in Adrian's eyes. It was all connected. But just as the realization sank in, something unexpected happened. The man suddenly froze, his expression shifting from confident to alarmed. He looked toward the door, his body stiffening. Adrian's eyes widened. No, they can't be here. Not yet. Before anyone could react, the sound of gunshots echoed through the house, followed by the crash of glass shattering. The men in suits scattered, chaos erupting in the room. And then, standing in the doorway, was a figure Eliza never expected to see. It was Theodore. But this was not the same Theo she had known. His face was cold, hard, as he calmly aimed a gun at the men in black. Get out, he commanded, his voice low and dangerous. Eliza's mind raced. What was going on? Was Theo part of this too? Was he working for these men? The tall man who had been speaking to her froze, his eyes narrowing as he faced Theo. You're making a mistake. Theo's eyes flickered to Eliza, his expression unreadable. I don't think so. This has gone far enough. In an instant, everything shifted. Theo's sudden intervention threw the balance off, and the tension in the room reached its peak. Adrian, still standing between Eliza and the men, looked at Theo with a mix of relief and regret. You're doing this now? Theo didn't answer. He just nodded toward Eliza, motioning for her to follow him. Come on, we're leaving. The door crashed open again, this time revealing a group of armed men entering the house from the back. Theo stepped in front of Eliza, shielding her with his body. Not so fast, Theo said quietly. In that moment, Eliza realized just how deep the rabbit hole went. The truth she had been chasing wasn't just about Adrian or the dangerous people after him. It was bigger, much bigger, and no matter how much she wanted to walk away, she couldn't. Not now. The final twist hit her all at once. Theo, Adrian, the men in black. They were all part of a much larger web, a web that Eliza had somehow gotten tangled in, whether she liked it or not. As the chaos erupted around them, Eliza couldn't help but wonder if she would ever escape it. Would she survive this tangled web of lies, betrayal, and danger? Or had she already crossed a point of no return? The chaos in the house seemed to still for a brief moment as Theo stepped back, allowing Eliza to breathe. The armed men hesitated, their guns still raised, but no one moved. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Eliza's heart raced as she glanced between Theo and Adrian, trying to process everything she had just learned. Theo, still holding the gun steady, looked at her. You don't know the half of it, he said quietly. But right now, we need to get out of here. We'll explain everything, I promise. His voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the urgency in his eyes. Adrian moved closer to Eliza, his expression softer now, though still heavy with regret. I never wanted to put you in this situation, he said, his voice low and sincere. But it's over now. You don't have to be involved anymore. Eliza, torn between the two men, felt the weight of her decision pressing down on her. The truth she had chased was darker and more complex than she could have imagined, but one thing was clear. She was already too deep to walk away. With one last glance at Adrian, she turned to Theo. "Where are we going?" she asked, the uncertainty in her voice undeniable, but her resolve stronger than before. Theo nodded toward the door. "Somewhere safe," he said, guiding her out of the house. As they stepped into the night, the weight of everything that had happened started to sink in. The love, the betrayal, the danger. It had all been part of a larger game, a game that she had been unwillingly pulled into. But no matter where they went next, Eliza knew one thing: she would never be the same. The truth was out there, and it had changed everything. And as she walked into the unknown, she realized that perhaps the hardest part was not surviving the lies, but learning to live with the truth.